Chapter 22 of The Log of a Cowboy by Andy Adams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Our Last Campfire. By early dawn the next morning we were astir at our last camp on Sweetgrass, and before the horses were brought in we had put on the wagon box and reloaded our effects. The rainy season having ended in the mountain regions, the stage of water in the Yellowstone would present no difficulties in fording, and our foreman was anxious to make a long drive that day so as to make up for our enforced layover. We had breakfast by the time the horses were corralled, and when we overtook the grazing herd, the cattle were within a mile of the river. Flood had looked over the ford the day before and took one point of the herd as we went down into the crossing. The water was quite chilly to the cattle, though the horses in the lead paid little attention to it, the water in no place being over 3 feet deep. A number of spectators had come up from Frenchman's to watch the herd ford, the crossing being about a half a mile above the village. No one made any inquiry for Priest, though ample opportunity was given them to see that the gray-haired man was missing. After the herd had crossed, a number of us lent a rope in assisting the wagon over, and when we reached the farther bank, we waved our hats to the group on the south side in farewell to them and to Frenchman's Ford. The trail on leaving the river led up Many Berries, one of the tributaries of the Yellowstone, putting in from the north side, and we paralleled it mile after mile. It was with difficulty that riders could be kept on the right-hand side of the herd, for along it grew endless quantities of a species of upland huckleberry, and breaking off branches we feasted as we rode along. The grade up this creek was quite pronounced, for before night the channel of the creek had narrowed to several yards in width. On the second day out the wild fruit disappeared early in the morning, and after a continued gradual climb we made camp that night on the summit of the divide within plain sight of the Musselshell River. From this divide there was a splendid view of the surrounding country, as far as the eye could see. To our right, as we neared the summit, we could see in that rarefied atmosphere the buttes like sentinels on duty as they dotted the immense tableland between the Yellowstone and the mother Missouri, while on our left lay 1,000 hills, untenanted save by the deer, elk, and a remnant of buffalo. Another half-day's drive brought us to the shoals on the Musselshell, about 12 miles above the entrance of Flat Willow Creek. It was one of the easiest crossings we had encountered in many a day, considering the size of the river and the flow of water. Long before the advent of the white men, these shoals had been used for generations by immense herds of buffalo and elk migrating back and forth between their summer ranges and winter pasturage, as the converging game trails on either side indicated. It was also an old Indian ford. After crossing and resuming our afternoon drive, the cattle trail ran within a mile of the river, and had it not been for the herd of northern wintered cattle, and possibly others, which had passed along a month or more in advance of us, it would have been hard to determine which were cattle and which were game trails, the country being literally cut up with these pathways. When within a few miles of the Flat Willow, the trail bore off to the northwest, and we camped that night some distance below the junction of the former creek with the Big Box Elder. Before our watch had been on guard 20 minutes that night, we heard someone whistling in the distance, and as whoever it was refused to come any nearer the herd, a thought struck me, and I rode out into the darkness and hailed him. "Is that you, Tom?" came the question to my challenge, and the next minute I was wringing the hand of my old bunkie, the Rebel. I assured him that the coast was clear, and that no inquiry had been made for him the following morning, when crossing the Yellowstone, by any of the inhabitants of Frenchman's Ford. He returned with me to the bed ground, and meeting Honeyman as he circled around, was almost unhorsed by the latter's warmth of reception, and Officer's delight on meeting my bunkie was none the less demonstrative. For nearly half an hour He rode around with one or the other of us, and as we knew he had had little sleep, if any, for the last 3 nights, all of us begged him to go on into camp and go to sleep. But the old rascal loafed around with us on guard, seemingly delighted with our company and reluctant to leave. Finally, Honeyman and I prevailed on him to go to the wagon, but before leaving us he said, "Why, I've been in sight of the herd for the last day and night, but I'm getting a little tired of lying out with these dry cattle these cool nights and living on huckleberries and grouse, so I thought I'd just ride in and get a fresh horse and a square meal once more. But if Flood says stay, you'll see me at my old place on the point tomorrow." Had the owner of the herd suddenly appeared in camp, he could not have received such an ovation as was extended Priest the next morning when his presence became known. From the cook to the foreman, they gathered around our bed, where the rebel sat up in the blankets and held an informal reception, and 2 hours afterwards he was riding on the right point of the herd as if nothing had happened. We had a fair trail up Big Box Elder, and for the following few days, or until the source of that creek was reached, met nothing to check our course. Our foreman had been riding in advance of the herd, and after returning to us at noon one day, reported that the trail turned a due northward course towards the Missouri, and all herds had seemingly taken it. As we had to touch at Fort Benton, which was almost due westward, he had concluded to quit the trail and try to intercept the military road running from Fort McGinnis to Benton. McGinnis lay to the south of us, and our foreman hoped to strike the military road at an angle on as near a westward course as possible. Accordingly, after dinner, he set out to look out the country and took me with him. We bore off towards the Missouri, and within a half-hour's ride after leaving the trail, we saw some loose horses about 3 miles distant, down in a little valley through which flowed a creek towards the Musselshell. We reined in and watched the horses several minutes, when we both agreed from their movements that they were hobbled. We scouted out some 5 or 6 miles, finding the country somewhat rough, but passable for a herd and wagon. Flood was anxious to investigate those hobbled horses, for it bespoke the camp of someone in the immediate vicinity. On our return, the horses were still in view, and with no little difficulty we descended from the mesa into the valley and reached them. To our agreeable surprise, one of them was wearing a bell, while nearly half of them were hobbled, there being 12 head, the greater portion of which looked like pack horses. Supposing the camp, if there was one, must be up in the hills, we followed a bridle path up a stream in search of it, and soon came upon 4 men placer mining on the banks of the creek. When we made our errand known, one of these placer miners, an elderly man who seemed familiar with the country, expressed some doubts about our leaving the trail, though he said there was a bridle path with which he was acquainted across to the military road. Flood at once offered to pay him well if he would pilot us across to the road, or near enough so that we could find our way. The old placerman hesitated, and after consulting among his partners, asked how we were fixed for provisions, explaining that they wished to remain a month or so longer, and that game had been scared away from the immediate vicinity until it had become hard to secure meat. But he found Flood ready in that quarter, for he immediately offered to kill a beef and load down any 2 pack horses they had if he would consent to pilot us over to within striking distance of the Fort Benton road. The offer was immediately accepted, and I was dispatched to drive in their horses. 2 of the placer miners accompanied us back to the trail, both riding good saddle horses and leading 2 others under pack saddles. We overtook the herd within a mile of the point where the trail was to be abandoned, and after sending the wagon ahead, our foreman asked our guests to pick out any cow or steer in the herd. When they declined, he cut out a fat stray cow which had come into the herd down on the North Platte, had her driven in after the wagon, killed and quartered. When we had laid the quarters on convenient rocks to cool and harden during the night, our future pilot timidly inquired what we proposed to do with the hide, and on being informed that he was